Hi everyone and welcome back to Butchery 101. I'm Christina Glanuga and today we're going to talk about head cheese. Last week I posted a video about breaking down a whole pig in my little apartment. If you haven't watched it yet, here's a link for you to pop over and watch. I never thought I could butcher an entire animal in an apartment home, and while it did take some creative storage and preservation moves, I'm so glad I did because now we have all this wonderful local pork in the house. You can check out the aforementioned whole pig video for details on this pig, where it's from, and how I broke it down. We still have a ton more to cover, including the dry aging meat, including hams, shoulder and loin saddle, bacon, crispy skin tutorials, and so much more. Make sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss any of this awesome porky goodness. And now for more info on today's project. So the name is a little bit misleading because you would think that there's some sort of dairy product in this dish, but there totally isn't. The name comes from the French term fromage de tête, translated into English as head cheese. That's because the French word for cheese actually means mold, as in the thing that they pack cheese curds into in order to make a wheel of cheese. And as you'll see in this video, when you pack head meat and its super gelatinous jus into a mold, it's pretty much just like how you make cheese. Essentially, it's all the meat from the head, plus other bits like trotters, and in this case, the H-bone and tail, slow cooked together in moist heat to release all its collagen, picked from the bones, shredded or chopped, cooled, and then packed into molds. I know that seems like a lot, but we'll cover it all. Then you pour the ultra gelatinous jus over the top, chill, et voila, head cheese. It makes the most sense when you think about the context of preserving fresh meat for later and convenient use, and utilizing 100% of the animal. Oftentimes, head cheese is served today as a stand-alone terrine. Like, you get one slice of this on your charcuterie board to eat with bread or crackers and a condiment like mustard, pickles, or fruity puree. I'd been storing everything meant for head cheese, head, H-bone, tail, trotters, in the bottom drawer of my fridge. Now, normally I would brine these bits, but considering the kind of delicate nature of an apartment fridge's hardware and the non-zero chance I would spill some icky brine all over my carpet, I opted for a very basic dry brine method instead. That means I sprinkled everything very generously with plain kosher salt. That did a few things for me. One, it preserved the meat until I had the bandwidth to best deal with it. This footage is from the day after I broke down the pig, and like I said, I had this entire pig's worth of meat to preserve, store, or eat, and I couldn't do it all in just one day. So I let it sit in salt for a few days while I dealt with the rest of it. Two, it lightly flavors the meat. I pretty much didn't have to add any more salt to the situation at all going forward, but that is something to keep in mind when you're using salt as a preservative, because it does ultimately have an effect on the flavor. Although I guess I could have rinsed it more to mitigate that. Number three, it drew out / disinfected some of the potential ickiness from these sensitive areas like the eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. I mean, real talk, this was a real-life animal, and although most of it is sterile, there's no way I want to be eating the inside of a pig's mouth straight up. So I really wanted to make sure that I could at least slightly disinfect all of the surfaces while still letting the meat be edible. And I was really pleased with the amount of liquid that the salt drew out, because it does seem to me that it cleaned it up a little bit, and it did buy me like 3 to 4 days before I had to move on to the next step. So the day I finally had to cook this baby off, I piled everything into this pan, which is a 4-inch hotel pan for those keeping track, and then rinsed it 4-ish times. I used to work at a place where they'd submerge the bits in water and leave it under just slightly running water to rinse, like they were defrosting it. I guess it would achieve the rinsing and it would do it in a way that didn't take a lot of active work time, but I'm pretty sure that's actually a super wasteful use of water. The water did get pretty clear though, which is nice because at first it was lightly murky and kind of thick with proteins. I wanted to keep this flavoring as neutral as possible while also ensuring that it's super palatable. Not gonna lie friends, pig head is a super flavorful bit of meat, and so it's important that we acknowledge that it's very different from what our modern Western palates are accustomed to. So no, I'm not always down with just straight up pig head flavor, but with just a little bit of complementary flavors, you can really take the edge off. I added like 3 strips of lemon zest and a few pinches of dried oregano and thyme from my friend's farm, and like 3 cloves of garlic. And even just this like tiny amount of flavorings made a huge difference in how pronounced the piggy flavor was. Again, no judgment if you happen to love that barnyardy head element, but I want to make this kind of eating a little bit more accessible to more people. And I feel like there's a lot of elitism and judgment out there regarding the offcuts of meat, and a lot of condescension towards the people whose palates just aren't used to that. And it's not their fault because it's not their fault that their palates aren't geared for it, because the society we live in today has so much influence over what has been available for us to eat. So I just want to make sure that this is a safe space for anyone just now learning how to eat the entire animal. Then I filled the pan most of the way up with water, and this actually is a good trick from my restaurant days to ensure the tightest seal for steaming purposes. You put 1 layer of plastic wrap on top, and then top that with foil. Crimp down the edges as much as possible. Ideally, all of the pig would be submerged in water, but this super tight seal does a really great job at trapping the steam so that it's almost negligible which parts were in or out of water. I popped this into a cold oven and then set the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and let the whole thing go for about 6 to 7 hours. Hey everyone, interrupting this video really quick to tell y'all about how to best support this channel and the super fun other products we have on offer. The Butchery 101 Patreon community has a bunch of different tiers and some really great rewards for each of them. I have some quick info on screen just now, but you can totally find the link in the description below when you want to join us. It includes exclusive content, shoutouts in YouTube videos, and you can even sponsor an entire YouTube video. I'm also really excited about the Meat Nerd tier of my Patreon community because that's the one where we do monthly one-on-one video consultations about you and your at-home meaty projects. Again, find the link in the description below. I'm also offering online holiday consultations and butchery classes. See my Tock page for more info, also linked in the description below. Anyway, back to the show. When we pulled it out of the oven, it was super hot, but super tender. It's always easier to pull meat while it's hot because everything's more tender and pliable, but it does mean you have to shove your sweet little fingies into 200-degree meat and jus. And when I was a line cook, we'd just pop on a double layer of latex gloves and do it by hand, which is so stupid because those gloves do exactly nothing to protect against heat. But here's a really good meat pulling hack. Be stoned and use long gastro tongs. Hand modeling and free labor here by my sweet partner Kale, who is also a meat/food professional, donating his valuable free time here to pick apart this bin of meat. At this point, we're getting rid of all of the large, egregious, obvious stuff that we don't want to eat, which at this point is mostly bones. After pulling, we set the whole thing into the fridge to chill down. So a few days later, again, once I had the bandwidth to deal with it, I pulled the pan out and kept going on with this process. This white stuff is congealed fat, which at this point is great to use for cooking in a frying pan or even saving it up to confit something. But it'll definitely have porky flavor to it, and it won't really hold up well for baking purposes. And the rest of what you see here is all that gelatinous headstock. So I put the whole pan back into the oven to melt the liquid enough to be able to pull out the meat. Then, once the meat and liquid are separated, I gloved up and picked through every bit of meat and made sure that the only things that made it through this filter are things that I would gladly eat. I mentioned this in the breakdown video, but honestly I fucked up and totally didn't remove glands as I went through like the butchering process. So now I'm having to meticulously pick through everything to make sure that I remove glands, palate, weird veins, anything I wouldn't gladly pop onto a spoon and into my mouth right now. Because later I'm not gonna wanna have to filter anything. I'm just gonna wanna eat it. I even trimmed up the jowls, which often have an entire layer of tiny glands that can look like meat, but seriously are not nearly as delicious. Then I cubed up the rest of the jowl and cut up the ear. The point of this type of charcuterie is to utilize the entire animal. The meat from a pig's head, tail, and H-bone and trotter are super nutritious and flavorful, but not nearly as accessible as like the other muscle meat from the animal. So we want a way to process, preserve, and make readily available that nutrition. Storing the super perishable meat inside its gelatinous jus is a form of preservation. This anaerobic environment extends the fridge shelf life of the meat by a long shot. The ratio of meat to broth is kind of up to you. I certainly could have suspended the meat in much more broth. But the plain broth is great to have on hand too. I'm gonna slice this up and have it bagged in the freezer. I'll be adding cubes of this broth to soups and stews all winter long. Plus, all the collagen in this broth is gonna do wonders for my skin, hair, and nail health. Not to mention how good it is for your bones and muscles, obviously. Again, I used to think of this as like a standalone dish, but so far it's been much more valuable in my kitchen as a readily available magic bullet of good meat and nutrition. I made tacos with a good chunk of the head cheese, plus my leftover Thanksgiving turkey, fortified a pesto-based pasta sauce with a couple of slices of the head cheese, and I added a bunch of the plain jus to a pot roast recently to fortify the liquid and get that extra little bit of collagen in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope this video helps y'all get a little more brave when trying new recipes and other bits of the animal. And feel okay that maybe you're not completely in love with those cuts just yet, but you can totally find ways to make nose to tail dining sustainable and palatable for your home. If you found this helpful and informative, please do tap the like button and subscribe to see what else I'm doing to utilize the rest of the pig. Also, make sure to tune in for my live streams Tuesdays and Fridays when I check in on my dry aging pork. Huge thanks again to the patrons who helped make this happen. Stay safe out there, y'all, and I'll see you soon for another episode of Butchery 101. Bye.